moves
Come on.
they
Vote for people doing work like this already. Happy Halloween. We are here at WCC in Las Vegas on October 31st, celebrating the release of the Satoshi White Paper. It's the 11th year anniversary of that, as well as the 50th anniversary of the first message sent over the internet from UCLA. And we are here in the EOS Pavilion with Meet the Blockers. And we are going to get into block production, and we can start out with, I guess what would be helpful is a quick update on everything that just happened in Rio. We had a big community gathering, and would love to just hear, from you. What's the takeaway for all of us that were not able to be there?
Yeah, it was awesome. We could gather the community actually, and for the first day, it was like a gift from the EOS community to the local Brazilian community, and we made an event to get people to know EOS and blockchain in general, and just get into this, as you said, building the future that we want and building the decentralized future. And then, of course, we had the EOS Community Conference, which is always awesome to be with the guys and discussing the future of the network and what are the main challenges and how can we solve those. And it's always great to brainstorm and a lot of ideas flowing, and people already started working on those. And I think this really strengthened the community and what we can achieve. So we did 1 day of EOS Community Conference and then 2 days of unconference with people really brainstorming and building around what this community or what we feel is needed for the community.
And how big is the EOS community in Brazil?
It's actually not big. In Brazil, we have a lot of Bitcoin maximalists and people that are investing and trying to get rich in fiat by using crypto. And we are actually building this community with a focus on applications, on how you can use this to make your life better. And that's what's about, like the first day. We already have decentralized applications running and people using it without even knowing that it's blockchain. And this is really our vision. We are growing the community as developers. We had universities that we are doing boot camps about EOS, and entrepreneurs and developers that decided to move to EOS. So we are trying to create this community in Brazil.
And outside of Brazil, in neighboring countries like Argentina and Chile, what is the EOS community like there, and what sort of participation was there? I assume that this pretty much gathered everyone in Latin America that's super active in the EOS community. So what was that representation like?
Yeah, we had the opportunity to co-host this event with EOS Argentina actually, and they had a huge necessity for crypto in Argentina and Venezuela, especially because the country's economy is crumbling down and people are flying away from peso to dollar. But then now dollars are, you cannot buy dollars in Argentina because of just the situation and the currency devaluation. So people are going to Bitcoin and to other cryptocurrencies as an alternative to save the value that they have right now. And in Venezuela, people are trading based on cryptocurrencies, and this enables them to have a somewhat functioning economy, because the problem in Venezuela is not how much money you have. You don't have access to things. It doesn't matter because the economy is so kind of shattered that you cannot have access. So Argentina have a big crypto community. They have been into crypto for a long time, and they had this history of devaluating currency and macroeconomic problems that kind of pushed them to it. And we had the lucky and the happiness of being able to get EOS Venezuela, EOS Argentina, EOS Costa Rica, and everyone from Latin America there. And it was great to understand what people are doing in different situations with blockchain.
And so just before we move on, background on EOS Rio. Who is EOS Rio? How did that get started? When did that get started? And kind of how has this experience been for you as a block producer? You know, as everyone paying attention, again, rock or block the vote. It's critical. The success of the EOS mainnet does largely depend upon the block producers and the quality of those block producers. The onus, if you want, EOS to be successful, it is imperative that you stake. It's imperative that you vote, whether that be taking the time yourself to investigate block producers and vote for those people that are adding value to the community, or pass those votes on to a proxy that you believe will. But whatever you do, the success of this ecosystem long-term relies on having a strong, well-functioning blockchain, and the block producers are what make that happen. So this is your opportunity to hear it live and see why you should be voting for EOS Rio.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Well, EOS Rio, it's me, Thiago, Igor, and Domi, my co-founders, and we have a team of 7 people now. We are part of the Ghostbusters collective. We helped in the very early days of the network, and we got to EOS basically because we wanted to develop decentralized applications. We all understood the value of it and how it can impact the lives of people. And we started trying to do this on Ethereum. It did not work. We had a prototype, but we could not run because we did not have the money to do it on chain, even to just pilot it. So we went out looking for technologies that would work for us, and we bumped into EOS before it was released and before the first test nets. And Igor was, okay, this is great. If they deliver on what they are promising, this is awesome. And then Block 1 started delivering on time, and then this may work. Great. We were there for network launch. It was a very exciting process, and for this first year we've been learning a lot. We've been participating. We built Hyperion, which is the most used open source history solution for EOSIO networks. Actually, it's operating on all networks, and it's not just us. We have a lot of people operating Hyperion nodes, and we try to help as much as possible with the technical side and now with the community side, understanding that building upon EOS and creating adoption is what will actually create impact. It's not about the token price. It's about what we can achieve in terms of changing this economic system that won't work for long from now. So I think, that's it. We are technical players on the network and focus on be builders of decentralized applications that people can use on their day-to-day life.
So I think you heard a lot of what you need to hear there, and that is that EOS Rio, and I know this, and now you know this, has been around since the early days of EOS, helped launch the EOS mainnet, and has continued to be major reliable contributors to the ecosystem, and also provide geographic diversity. At the Brock Pierce one, which is not just me, but at our proxy, one of the things that we look for is we want to see geographic diversity amongst block producers. We want to know that we're not reliant upon any one country. We want to know that the network is distributed across the planet. And clearly Latin America has a role to play in this, also in spreading the word and making people aware in places like Brazil and Argentina that clearly have a big role to play in this ecosystem's development. So we're big fans of EOS Rio, and as you get to learn more, hope you are too. So let's take a little walk a little closer to home. Let's take a little trip to Fordland. Let's talk about Detroit.
Sounds good. Just one thing, though, I do want to say that...
If you want to drop any M&M beats, you can.
Yeah, he's the one who can freestyle. Dylan over here, my co-founder. I did want to say, though, the Rio Community Conference was just so inspirational. I went into it fatigued, sort of disillusioned, and felt by the end of the week rebonded, reinvigorated, closer with actionable items to act on. So it was amazing, and you guys really produced it so well. So thank you, Tiago. It was really good.
Thank you, and I wish I could have been there.
Yeah. So as far as Detroit goes, what do you want to know?
Well, let's hear the story of what is EOS Detroit. How did you get started? How have you been contributing? A large part of this is not only talking to call it Brock Pierce 1 as a proxy, but this show is to help educate those that are interested in the EOS ecosystem, those that are interested in the governance of the EOS ecosystem, and those that are interested in the performance, the underlying infrastructure that powers the ecosystem. Again, it's imperative, if you care about the long-term success of this community, to stake and to vote. And if you don't take the time to be informed yourself to make good decisions as to who you vote for, then pass that on to a proxy. And there's a number of great proxies that are doing that work. But this is very important if you care about the long-term viability of the network. And so a big part of this is how as token holders, it's really hard to, pick up to 30 block producers. I mean, we run a proxy. We run, I think, the second largest proxy. And it's hard for me as someone that spends a very large percentage of my time, and Ben Sigmund, et cetera, to just figure out what to do. And so this is an opportunity to connect with EOS token holders and help them understand, who you are, what motivates you, why you're doing this, and how you continue to support the community so that the community hopefully makes better decisions. And I want to stress better decisions, because I think as a community we're failing right now. I see a lot of the best technically competent block producers. I see a lot of the biggest contributing block producers that are doing the most for this industry not being recognized for the great work that they're doing. And if we want this network to succeed long term, we need to be voting for those people that are doing the best work, the block producers that are helping us succeed. And we can't let this be a network that has been captured by, voter collusion. And we have major issues there, which we'll get into in a moment. But I can't stress this enough. If you care about the long-term success of EOS, it is imperative that you vote wisely and choose those stewards that are best suited to support the underlying infrastructure of the network, and especially while the governance exists there. I'm personally, we'll get into that, I don't think the governance should lie solely at the block production end of the spectrum, and we need to fix a few things. But it's really important that you have the right block producers in place when 15 of 21 get to make every decision right now. So I can't stress this enough. Make sure you vote. Make sure you get informed and vote wisely. And if you don't have the time to do it, pick a proxy that does.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brock. And appreciate your vote. So EOS Detroit was founded last March, and we got together, Dylan, Adam, and myself. We're now a team of 7, but it was originally 3, and decided, we wanted to serve this open source community. We love the mission of EOS and the people that have rallied around it, and we wanted to show up and bring a little piece of it to our place of home and, transform the local economy in our place that we live through these new technologies. And we knew this would be a long road. So we got together and figured, there's this opportunity to be a block producer candidate, started up our campaign in March, and just stood up the nodes and started building community in our locality. And so our major focus was sort of getting out there and trying to bring in new blood, teaching people in our city what's going on, why they should care, sort of priming them for this new economic paradigm that we're all ushering in together. We were also there for launch. We did a lot of live streaming in the early days to sort of provide transparency to the community about what the block producers are talking about. So we were getting on these Zoom calls with all the BPs and live streaming them out there just to sort of provide a record of what's being talked about, because there was some concern about like backdoor meetings and things. So we really saw ourselves as a media contributor and a community builder. And so, we've been in and out of pay the whole time. So we've had to sort of design our team around not expecting to get paid for what we're doing. It's really a passion driven motivation here, and we are really excited to start getting paid in December, fell out in January, came back in March, and then fell out in August again. So it's sort of been up and down, but it's really caused our team to evaluate, how do we provide value for this ecosystem? And what we did was sort of took a step back and said, okay, maybe we're not as competitive right now on EOS, so how can we still leverage EOSIO to start these variant networks and support them and keep ourselves in the game while also experimenting on new modes of governance, new protocol configurations, and just sort of, providing these experimental groups to the control group of the EOS mainnet. Because as you said yesterday, that's like a very expensive network. It's, billions of dollars in market cap, so we should be cautiously deploying updates to it. And so we helped create Telos, and we're still a bit active there. We got involved with Warbly a little bit, and OR, which is the OR ID chain for sort of identity federation through OAuth, so logging in with Facebook and Google. I think eVeripedia is using this. And more recently, we've been involved with WAX. So we're helping create a BP evaluation framework so that we can actually create an objective list of criteria to evaluate BPs through multiple dimensions, from technical excellence to software development to community building to business development. So we've been doing a considerable amount of foundational work that I think we can cherry pick from network to network. So the beautiful thing about EOSIO is it's like a fractal. All of these networks can spin off and sort of have their own configurations and purposes for being, and we can learn a lot and then take the best learnings from each network and roll them over into each other. So there's an additive effect there. So beyond that, though, we're just all here from a place of love. We really love the EOS community and love having the opportunity to serve. So we're building up our smart contract competencies and looking to deploy more products on EOS, as that seems to be the best vector for adoption. Blockchains are just very complicated for the average person. So we need to build up abstraction layers, as Tiago was mentioning, so we can deploy these things without even the end user needing to know there's a blockchain under it. So we're thinking a lot about how do we do that and how do we create the ramps to get our city on EOSIO and help. So we basically, there's just this massive opportunity to redistribute wealth, to provide new economic opportunities, new types of business model innovation, and we love being a part of it. So we're here for the long haul. I like to call it the cockroach strategy. You can't kill us, and we're going to keep pivoting and shifting and molding, and we'll stay alive one way or the other. Beyond that, too, we've also helped form the Detroit Blockchain Center, which is more of a neutral advocacy group in Detroit, and we're really looking forward to some of the initiatives coming through there. We're looking to host the EOS Community Conference next year in Detroit, as well as I mentioned yesterday this EOSIO accelerator. That's not technically announced, but it will be officially announced in a few months, and
we hope to have you back on the show when that's the case, and you can tell us more.
Definitely. So yeah, we're out here and always looking to engage with the community. So if you have any feedback or if you ever want to come to Detroit and see what's going on, we welcome everyone.
Yeah, and if you're watching this on YouTube, remember to smash that like button, subscribe, but also you can drop into the comments section, and this can be an ongoing dialogue. These are the types of block producers that I like to see, in the ecosystem. These are the types of block producers that we choose to support at BP1, and take the time to know who you're voting for and choose why. Technical competence, heart's in the right place, major contributors, contributing in all the ways you can. So I want to just touch on one of the things that you mentioned here, which is, block producer pay. We've been starting to see competent block producers shutting down because they can't afford to sustain themselves. And you made, I think, an important comment. Under all circumstances, cockroach style, you will survive. You don't die, which is good. Clearly, we need that right now under the present circumstances. You've probably read Dan's most recent sort of post on, how we change things. And one of the things that's been proposed here is adding to, at a minimum, call it the economic incentives. Right now, the only economic incentive that is given out is the block rewards to block producers. We have a lot of people staking now, a lot of people voting now, and one of the ideas that's been put forth, and I'd love to hear both of your sort of feedback here, is, incentivizing people to stake and incentivizing people to vote and rewarding token holders for participating, which means if you are a token holder that is voting, if you're a token holder that is staking, you're receiving a benefit. If you're not, you are a member of, call it the token holders that is bearing, call it the inflation on the network. Meaning, if you leave your money in an exchange and you're an EOS trader, you're essentially paying for the network, which is fine. I'm not saying that everybody has to stake and vote. Clearly, we need some tokens on exchanges, and we need some amount of trading and liquidity, for this to be viable. But the question is, who pays for the network? Right now, all EOS token holders are paying for the network equally. And the idea is, instead of having all token holders pay, have those that are not staking and voting pay by creating that economic incentive for the token holders. I'd love to hear what you both think about that idea, because this is, for these things to happen, it's ultimately going to need block producers supporting that change. So what do you think of this idea?
Great question. I think that voting is a form of work. It takes cognitive labor to evaluate, to do the research. So I am all for rewarding voters. I think that we should do it through a separate pool than the BP pay. Currently, we're seeing proxies spawn up. I mean, it's been in process for a while now, probably at least 6 months. But these pools that pay kickbacks to voters for proxying into them, some of which are sort of reinforcing these nodes that are pretty opaque and no one's really sure who's behind them. And others, newer ones, Vote for Value and Colin Talks Crypto Rewards, are trying to pick value-adding BPs, but also offer the incentive to give a kickback to voters. So it's really interesting to see that happening. It shows there's a demand for the voters to earn some amount for their work. However, I think that it's very messy to do this through the BP inflation pool, because it distracts the BPs from doing the value add work when we have to worry about, are we topping up all of these voter pools? Where it's hard to plan, because not only is the token price volatile, but the amount you have to pay out of what you're getting back is volatile, so you can't really do budgeting very well because you don't know how much money you're going to have from month to month to work with. So I support this change at the protocol level to take maybe some of the savings fund and apply it to a new pool that would go back to all voters. And this is actually a change we saw in WAX. So in WAX, 2% of the pay goes to voters that are staking in voting, and then 2% goes to the BPs and 1% for worker proposal fund. And this is great because now the voters aren't going to demand this through the BP stream per se, or it's less likely, I think. So I think it's important that we pay everyone for their work, including the voters.
Yeah, I like the idea of paying for staking, and especially when you talk about bond pools. We have written and discussed this in other groups. before the proposal came out, and not with Dan Larimer, but talking about, okay, if you stake for 10 years, you should be rewarded for the commitment that you have of the network, and you're also contributing to token value by reducing the tokens turnover. I just think that this should be taught, and especially the staking pool movement that we have right now, it is fair, and it's kind of rewarding token holders that invested at a really higher token price and took the blow and lost money. They did not realize it yet or liquidated it, but they're trying to make money the way they can, and or not lose as much money. And the problem is when we just try to survive, we'll eat anything that there is, even ourselves. And I think that this is actually the problem of the distribution of resources that we have right now, because this is a talent pool. There is limited talent pool on blockchain and on EOSIO ecosystem, and talents they have to survive, and they will work on what and try to create a balance between, okay, what we believe in and what we can make a living out of. And this is basic. If you get block producers that are good and that are not working on mainnet anymore, you will have technical issues that won't be addressed. An example, like 15 past midnight on New Year's Eve, Igor, my co-founder, was troubleshooting a bug on EOS mainnet, which could stop the operation. And along with Zal, they
vote for people doing work like this already.
And the thing is, along with Zal from Lao Mao, they troubleshooted. We bought a RAM for system accounts, and were able to do something that have been done other times with multiple block producers participating on this kind of effort. If you don't have this kind of talent pool working 24/7 for the network, you will have less quality on what you can deliver to the users. So this is basically about, in my opinion, about talent pool. Of course, I don't think that block producers should be making Lambos out of producing blocks, and no one is. And even if you get the top 21 block producers, we did not have one sponsorship from top 21 block producers. And it's not that they don't like us or they don't like the network. They are not making money. They're making less money than we are. They probably can sustain a team that's smaller than we can and less talent pool than what we can, because they are paying out to voters. And this is fair, that people that are staking and that are committed long-term to the network, they should make money out of this. This is how we work. I mean, you buy a government bond and you make an interest out of this, because you're saying with your money that you trust the country, and you say, okay, I trust that I'll give you this money and you pay me back, and need to be stronger. So I think that the problem with the system is more about how we are kind of sharing and investing this shared resource, and not necessarily about the governance. I think that my opinion is that we'll have a constellation of EOSIO chains, with mainnet being maybe the base layer, and that's at least what I envision. And I actually believe that the base layer should have as little governance as possible, in a way that you're not imposing something that you think over others, but people can freely decide which governance they will adhere. I mean, I want to be governed by some laissez-faire governance, while other people think that order is important and they want to have a more orderly governance. That's okay. People should be able to choose. I mean, citizens should be sovereign, and blockchain allows for that. I was reading that yesterday. I mean, governments should be service providers. We should be able to choose which institutions we are adhering to and giving our resources to, according to what they can offer us. So I believe that the idea is great. I think that we have a problem with how we are investing in collectively taking the decision of where we are investing in the resources that are generated by the network. And this is very important at this point because we failed in the beginning by not creating a worker proposal system that should be accounting for those kind of developers. I mean, you need history APIs, but this is a free service that are being provided by a few block producers that may not be paid tomorrow, and you may not have this kind of service because you are paying back to voters that they are right in their desire to kind of have these taking rewards, but they may not be seeing how it affects the long-term value of the token. I mean, if you have 110% of some asset that just devaluated 50%, this is not better than having 100% of an asset that increases value in 20%. So this is, for me, the game, and I think that there are people trying to do this and trying to create this better system. But I think that we have to discuss this. How are we allocating the resources? Is that the best interest of EOS mainnet or EOS ecosystem on the long term? And voters should get this kind of conscious, but it's also hard because you don't want to be the one that's voting for value players that are keeping the network up and making it a high-quality network, while others are simply not staking or staking for rewards and getting their money. So you end up in this kind of lockup, which is difficult to get out of. But if we don't, there is only one way, and it's not very good, in my opinion.
Well, good to hear. At least we have consensus up here in these chairs that figuring out a way to reward token holders for working, that work being choosing who to vote for, as well as rewarding them for staking or locking up their tokens. I mean, right now with, staking your tokens puts you at a risk with no economic upside, in the sense that if the market were to take a big crash, you aren't an ability, you've limited your ability to sell if you so chose. And so I'm glad to see that we all agree on this. And then the question is, if you lock up your tokens for 10 years, how should you be rewarded versus if you lock up your tokens for 5 years or 3 years or 2 years or 1 year or 9 months or 6 months? And, how do you create that, that economic scale? And I do believe that if architected correctly, you can create a strong incentive that encourages people to buy essentially a 10-year bond, which is essentially what you're doing in the EOS mainnet or the EOS token. And what should those interest rates be? How are those interest rates determined? Is something that we probably need to spend a little bit more time working on. But anyone that's paying attention to this, definitely, again, smash that like button. And in the comment sections, if you have any opinions or any thoughts on on this issue, should token holders be rewarded for doing the work of voting? Should token holders be rewarded for staking and holding? And if you have any thoughts on what that formula should look like, that's the beauty of open source communities. This is an invitation to participate. This is an invitation to get involved. Teamwork makes this collective dream work. And so, be part of the dream. The last piece that, was mentioned here is worker proposal systems. I've been a big believer in the worker proposal system. The network has to thrive one way or another. There's a few ways that application developers, or call it major contributors to the ecosystem, can finance the work that they're doing. One is they can raise traditional capital through, accelerators, angel investors, venture capitalists. There's kind of that traditional model. Then there's that more new age crypto model with ICOs and IEOs, and I think that model is going to come back as soon as we've got governance. When DACs and DAOs, get to where they're going, then you can actually comfortably contribute large resources to an idea, because those resources are not in the hands of a couple of founders in an opaque environment with no transparency and where things don't necessarily get done as promised, and there's no recourse. Once you have a DAC or a DAO and that money can sit in that foundation as token holders with the right governance in place, with the right control mechanisms in place, that project can be kept on course. So I do believe that the ICO market is going to come back. And I think it's going to come back in a big way, probably more rational, but also with the control mechanisms in place where, people can come together around creating things that, the world or the ecosystem needs, and it can be done with transparency and governance. And I think that, we're under a year away from that happening. Other sources would be, funding from Block 1, but that really goes kind of into bucket 1. But the last piece is the worker proposal system. It was always in this particular chain's original vision where the inflation, can actually fund development of things that the network agrees are needed. And the WPS system has never really performed in any of the ways that we thought it would, hoped it would, and I don't think there's consensus around this. Some people think, the WPS system should just go away and it's not needed, and let's have less inflation. I still sit in the camp of, I think that it's very much needed. I look at the EOS ecosystem today, and sadly, I don't like to say this because this is a bit of a downer, but I don't feel like we're accelerating in an upward sort of momentum right now. I don't feel like application development and activity and building around the network is accelerating. I think we're decelerating. And I think that's due to a lack of resources. It's just a resource allocation game. I think that's what's the cause of it. It's not the performance of the network. It's not the potential of the network. It's a resource allocation thing. Not everybody can afford to work for free. And people can't afford to run services for free. I mean, yesterday, before giving my EOS kind of State of the Union address, I went to Block Matrix and I forgot, oh wait, all of that's gone. It's when you go online, critical resources, or at least resources that I use and I was a fan of, are disappearing. I'd say that's a negative sign. And so I'd love to hear from both of you kind of thoughts on where you stand on worker proposal systems, and how from your individual, or if you can speak on behalf of your block producer, what you would like to see and what you support in this regard.
Yeah, first of all, I agree that we are kind of decelerating. At least I think that in the beginning, while you had this, the voting was more, okay, I believe those block producers are delivering value, and these resources were one way or another being kind of controlled by the block producers. The block producers could create this kind of innovation and a worker proposal system that was not a worker proposal system per se, but we were able to invest in developing the apps for free without being paid for that, and we achieved good things. We created a app, the Gaia app for tokenizing waste collection and incentivized recycling. We could do that for free because basically we were being paid by the network, and we could had other efforts that weren't paid by anyone because they were being paid by the network. But when you change the dynamics and you start voting for staking pools, you all of a sudden don't have that kind of cash flow going to innovation. And maybe this is not the best way. I don't think that the best way is just to get like block producers and they will decide what they will do with the money. If someone wants to buy Lambos and other people want to develop the apps, they can do it. I think that worker proposal works best for this. And again, this is a competitive landscape. If you get to Tezos, for instance, if you get to a central bank and say, oh, I want to develop this project, and the central bank say, oh, I don't have the money, or you have to go through a public tender for us to hire you, Tezos Foundation will say, I'll pay for the project, because I have the money and I can kind of discretionary say what I will finance, what I will fund, and you can have this kind of business development and infrastructure development because you have this fund, which may be a worker proposal fund. I think the EOS Foundation is a great initiative because you will have this kind of discretionary power to fund initiatives that are important for the network.
That's going to be my next question. After WPS is the EOS Foundation. So let's stick to WPS for the moment,
awesome.
then we'll get into that because I want to hear your opinions. Is this a good idea? But let's do that next.
Awesome. But WPS was extensively discussed during the conference. I think that we have a model to propose. It's great that people are doing this on WAX and on BOS, and we are experimenting with different worker proposal methodologies on those other chains. But I think we have to seriously considering implementing this as soon as possible on mainnet, in my opinion. And this will also create the possibility for token holders to have APRs without damaging this the network. So I think it's great. We have to implement it, in my opinion, as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well. It's good to decouple the funding of applications and ecosystem growth initiatives from block production so that people that have other skills are able to contribute and earn outside of knowing how to run a cluster of nodes and keep them highly available and all of that. So big supporter of worker proposal systems. From my vantage point, they're hard to get right, but they're so worth it. We've seen great success in other projects. BitShares has a functioning worker proposal system. We've got like a $50 million pool that they've been allocating to hire full-time devs for both the protocol and the front end. It took years for them to start using those funds to figure out how to coordinate it, how to basically manage it, because it's pioneering. And we know Dash has a great worker proposal system. They're always highly lauded. Bosses is super interesting. I like the fact that they have an audit phase and they're milestone based. So, as you said, the accountability is there, sort of like with DAX managing ICOs or IEOs in the future. That accountability layer is just so important. I think the fear on EOS is that the worker proposal system will be subverted in order to gain yield. So fake proposals will be pushed through, and then sort of we have the same issue that we're seeing with block producer pay being subverted for yield. So that's sort of like the big question to solve. How do we make sure that this can be deployed in a manner that it isn't going to be subverted? And will actually be deployed for ecosystem growth, because if we view EOS as an early stage startup DAC, we should be reinvesting in ecosystem growth. It's not time to pay dividends. That's like an early stage startup just saying, oh, we got all this investor money, let's pay dividends. And that doesn't make investors very happy. So yeah, I fully support it. I don't have the answer for how we prevent that subversion, but I think that it's amazing that people, the brightest minds in our community, are working towards that. And to me, the other large challenge is how do we engage the largest stakeholders and convince them of the value of this? It's a pseudonymous system. We don't even know who these large stakeholders are or what channels to reach them on. So if we could figure out how to distribute, a distribution channel for engaging the largest token holders, then we could have a two-way dialogue so the builders in the community would understand what their wants and needs are. But right now it's sort of like we're just spraying and praying. And so figuring out how to actually talk to the largest stakeholders is important. And I did want to mention another thing. You mentioned, potentially Block 1 deploying capital into the ecosystem. As it stands, they can't touch any block producers. They can't even look at us. And so it's kind of a weird dynamic, and I get it, it's legal in nature, and they're trying to protect themselves and make sure that they can take the right steps to get the laws in place and sort of moving the needle progressively on regulation.
This is the actual reason I left Block 1.
Gotcha.
So that I can have these conversations and can do it publicly.
Love it.
This is the actual reason, is to be involved in the community, because this is what drives me.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Appreciate that we can talk about it. Just like one colloquial example, we were helping plan a decentralized application for EOS. They're talking to EOS VC. Just the fact that we were involved in helping them plan their project made EOS VC basically say, "Oh, we can't touch you." So the question that I would like to pose to Block One, if they're out there listening, could you please provide guidance on how block producers can work with you? I mean, EOS Detroit, we've decided to set up multiple entities, so we have different vehicles that we can, and different teams in those vehicles even, so we've sort of created an ecosystem of organizations to sort of quarantine the political nature or the legal liability of the block producer. But because this is not anything that guidance has been provided on, we don't even know if this is a valid approach or not. So it'd be really helpful if Block One's legal team could help us understand how to do this so that you can help the community and deploy your capital into these amazing teams like EOS Rio. So yeah, that's
perfect, and a perfect segue, I think, into the next conversation, right? So it sounds like, in summary, there's consensus amongst the three of us here that the inflation on the network should be into three buckets, in the hopefully near future. That being that block producers should continue to be compensated, and it should not come from block producers, but two other constituents should be compensated or rewarded by the network. That being voters that do the work to vote and stake, and being rewarded by the duration of time that they stake. The bigger the lockup, probably the bigger the reward, probably more detail or refinement there. And that also a worker proposal system should be there to provide resources to those people building critical infrastructure, applications, tools, et cetera, that will support the healthy development of the overall ecosystem. So I believe that these are things that need to be done quickly, because I do believe that we're going through a decelerization sort of event. And when momentum, turns the other direction, it's fine. You're sailing. The sails are not always going to be, always full with the same degree of wind. But, you need to, hopefully catch that wind again and get back to fast sailing. And there's no reason that shouldn't happen. The EOS blockchain, and I'm chain agnostic, is today, I think, the most interesting in many respects in terms of what we can build and the things that we can do, the performance of the network, the number of accounts. Everything is going so well on so many fronts that to lose momentum on the, call it development layer, is something that long-term is scary. So we do need to get these things resolved sooner rather than later, I think, over the next few months ideally, and I think that we have to solve these problems in the next 6 months. So I want to talk about the EOS Foundation. Real quickly, the EOS Foundation is an idea that's been born out of a number of block producers all over the world, the EOS Alliance and others all coming together and saying, how do we create a nonprofit organization that does some of the work that is not currently being done by anyone because there's just not that organization there. In short, think of it as a city hall, with three C principles, code, capital, and connections. Right now, if you're a media organization, for example, and you want to talk to EOS, who is EOS? Who do you talk to? One of those resources could be to, have a speakers bureau, just creating a list of people that are contacts. You want to talk to someone in Brazil, talk to EOS Rio and talk to this person there. If you want to talk to someone in Detroit, but organizing this, in a fashion, and it's not an exclusive thing. If other or a centralized thing, there can be many of these. There doesn't need to be one, but we don't have any right now. So, like all things, it starts with one, the idea being things like a speakers bureau, a central repository of code, not centralized, but a place that you can go and, take a look at kind of code and things. Right now, it's very complicated to get to basic answers. If you want to know what's going on with EOS, where do you go today? You got to go to 10, 20 sources. So how do you aggregate all the industry news in a place, but not where it's biased? How do you organize that in a way where, the community can quickly figure out what's going on? Right now, if you want to get news, you got to go to a blog producer for the most part, or maybe a blogger. Aggregating all of that information into one place and hopefully doing it in a way that is unbiased as possible would be the goal. But there's a whole host of things. Having that conversation about worker proposal systems, organizing community, facilitating and helping support community events around the world, so that people are aware of these things. I'm sure there's many people that would have liked to have been in Rio that just didn't know, because there's not a place where you can go to find out what is going on. And to have these conversations around what do we do with worker proposal systems. I think that the ecosystem needs an entity like this. We've seen this with Bitcoin for a long time. We clearly see it with Ethereum right now. We see it with Tezos right now. Most of the successful chains out there have an organization like this, and it doesn't need to be limited to one, but they have an organization like this because it appears to be a critical function. And I think that we've seen, when you look across the overall ecosystem, that this is something that I think we're missing. And I think we're not serving ourselves well. And I think the community coming together in a community collaborative event to launch and organize, a foundation that can provide code capital and connections and make it easier for all members of the ecosystem to get what they're seeking. A town hall of sorts, a city hall of sorts, I think would serve us well, at least at this phase of the ecosystem's development. And I'd love to kind of hear what your thoughts are on this, and how involved you want to be, and should we do this? Because I think it's time, if we're going to do it, to again get this show on the road.
Yeah, thanks, Brock. It's super important. We need to have a cohesive voice for these traditional modes of communicating and organizing. Too much decentralization of responsibilities can trend into chaos, as we've seen, and canceling narratives, and in general, if we have this sort of entity, we can create a hub around which the community can rally. We can share a vision or try to articulate shared visions. We can have that liaison to the media. I get emails all the time like, wow, you created EOS? Wow. And basically I'm like, no, and I have to go through this elaborate explanation of Block 1 created the software, and there's this giant decentralized community, and we're one of the, we're like a brick in the entire building, basically, and it's very complex. And for outsiders, we need to cut through that and make it very clear how this ecosystem is organized. So I totally support it. I was able to listen in on Luke's vision. He's been spearheading this, Luke Stokes. I really like the direction he's heading in, using the EOS DAC software to organize and make this something that is based, the representation in the governance of the proposed foundation is based on quantifying value add across all the contributors in the ecosystem. And I love it. I think that the people who are sweating and bleeding for the network should be able to come together and deploy funding and create these shared visions. So totally support it. As far as involvement, I mentioned to Luke and Rio, I'm happy to bring Detroit to bear, EOS Detroit to bear in this initiative, however we can be of service. We're following along in Telegram. There's a Telegram channel for those who want to get involved. Just, come find me and I can add you. So it's evolving. It's an evolving conversation. Of course, it's very difficult to do this type of thing because there are so many different interests, so many different cultures. We're trying to forge a global open source culture. We're creating our own, we're creating our own system. So it's not going to be perfect, but if we set it up with strong foundations, we can iterate on it, we can make it better, and we can use this to, as you say, reverse the trend of deceleration back into an acceleration of growth, which is vital. So totally support it.
Yeah, and I mean, thanks, Luke, for the initiative. It's really great that you guys are doing this, and I think that this is a missing element that we have on EOS. I mean, one thing we talk to big companies, to big global companies, and one question that always surfaces is that, okay, take me to your leader. If I am like, imagine Walmart and Walmart's supply chain and working with a startup of 10 people in Rio, there's no way this will happen. We cannot work with Walmart, for instance, and this is not the actual example, but alone. They will need people in Australia. They will need people in Indonesia. They will need people all over the world. So it's great, and we have the best technology. Even people there are block producers that are working on other staking networks that pay them to do the projects. But they would say that EOS is the best technology. But the thing is, the best technology is not the winning technology for most of the history. The winning technology is the one that can create the network. And if we cannot create this kind of network that shows value, we will have great stories about having the best technology and being like the beta max of blockchain or something like that. So I think that initiatives such as a foundation, such as if we had like a consensus, and this is controversial, but this is something that can you can say, oh, you have IBM, and then you have this other company that is $1 billion company and it's spread all over the world, and that can serve this kind of client. So I think that this, and I really don't think that this is centralization, because this is free people exerting a kind of leadership, saying, okay, I think that this will work, and I'm willing to spend resources to do that. I mean, you funded the EOS Alliance for the first year. This is congratulations for that, and this is putting your skin in the game and putting your check where your mouth is. So I'm not just saying that. I'm putting my resources to make this happen, and if anyone wants to follow, that's the way we think this should go, and people can just, okay, this will work, and go with you. And I think this is a great way. We are definitely going with you guys, and I think it's great that you are spearheading, you and Luke, and you guys are doing a tremendous work.
It's a bunch of us, you know.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm very, very blessed that Luke is, taking the leadership role. But he's certainly not alone. It's a round table of many of us contributing in service in the ways that we can. Yeah. It's a bunch of questions, really. What does the community want? What do we as the community feel like we need? And this is an ongoing invitation to get involved. This is not a group of people saying, here's what we think should be done. It's a group of people saying, here are some ideas we have. What do you think? This is an invitation to get involved. We're seeking your opinion. We're seeking consensus. And together we can figure out what that foundation should be, so that foundation can be as effective as possible in serving us collectively, those of us that choose to get involved. And so please get involved and help make this the best thing that it can be, so that it can serve us to the best of its abilities. And it's there's no clear plan as of right now. It's an open conversation, and we need you, if you care, to get involved.
Yeah, and this is awesome. I mean, everyone can have a tremendous impact in what happens to the future of the network, and I think this is just great, and it feels great, and hopefully, and you're doing this by an entrepreneurial act of saying, not only that I want to discuss, but I'm doing this. If you want this, follow this. So this is entrepreneurial. This is like starting a business. You're saying, here I have something. If you want it, buy from me or just come here and use it. And this is, in my opinion, how it should be done and should be experimented. Okay, let's do the foundation. Can we get momentum with this? Can we get like donations? I mean, the foundation is a great way Block One can contribute to the ecosystem, because they can make a donation to a foundation. There's no problem on that. Probably there's no legal impediment for them to say, okay, yeah, I'm donating $1 billion to this foundation. It can be like childcare, it can be EOS Foundation. And
I think we'd be happy with $1 million to start, because like all things, you have to prove your efficacy. You know, we sink or we swim, right? There's an opportunity for us as a community to collaborate and give birth to something. And then the success and the longevity of that idea, that organization, that entity is going to be determined by the efficacy, how well it actually delivers value to the community. And based upon how much it contributes, we may choose to further feed it. And through that process, maybe that organization does end up with $1 billion of resources to help support the ecosystem in a nonprofit function. You know, it's the entire goal of this is, you know, something to support the overall ecosystem. And so I'm excited to see how we do. I'm excited to see, I believe that we've needed this for a while. And the main problem being that Block One can't speak. You know, the so-called leader, you know, that we've had is Block One / Dan Larimer. And, you know, there's a, you know, bit of those hands are tied, you know, ears are covered, you know, mouth is covered. It's, you know, kind of like one of those situations that has really been limiting, I think, the ecosystem's development, because, you know, can't have meetings, can't speak about things, can't contribute to things. You know, we're very limited. And so it feels to me like there's a big void in the ecosystem. And it's really less about leadership, it's more stewardship, right? But creating a forum or a venue or an organization, an entity, community, you know, collaboration to start to fill the holes, so that we can benefit and succeed in the ways that we've seen others. I think we're out of time. I think we have to break for lunch. But again, hit that like button, subscribe. You got any questions, remember to rock that boat, get involved. And especially when you start hearing about things like this, if you're a token holder, not only is it important that you're voting for the long-term success, but this is, you know, you've heard from all three of us, you know, we support voters getting paid. We support stakers getting paid. You know, if you're a token holder and you're not a block producer, that's something you should care about. And if if these are things that you should have an opinion about, and based upon that opinion, you should vote accordingly. So I would like to thank both of you again for being here at the EOS Pavilion. Happy Halloween. Happy Satoshi Bitcoin White Paper Day. Thank you so much.